Hello and welcome to the Aleph Zero Podcast. In today's episode, we've invited a handful of guests to discuss some of the most pressing issues around crypto today, and that is how to stay safe in that world and how to stay safe when interacting with new projects in both the Aleph Zero ecosystem and outside of it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Aleph Zero Podcast. Be sure to leave a review and subscribe to get the latest insights from core developers and projects in the ecosystem. Now back to the show.
Before we start, let's maybe do a round of introductions. I'm Anthony. I'm one of the co-founders of Aleph Zero, and I'm here with Ryan, Christopher, Andrew, and Matt. If we can start with Rick, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Yeah. Hi. This is Rick Deacon. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Interlock. My background is in cybersecurity. I've done that for over 15 years at this point for consulting firms and banks, and hacked into really big companies and broke all the stuff and told them what to fix and how to fix it. And that eventually evolved into me starting to build products that try to fix those problems, starting in like 2012, 2013, building enterprise products. And then in 2021, launching our foray into blockchain cybersecurity, which is being built on Aleph Zero. And our goal is to build products that keep people safe and then rewarding them for making the internet a safer place because of it as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. So now let's move on to Andrew, Chris, and then Matt.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Ciaccia, Rick's co-founder here at Interlock. I have a background of about 12 years in enterprise B2B marketing and go-to-market strategy. Have advised or worked with about 28 companies at this standpoint. Over the last year and a half of building Interlock, I've learned a lot about the pressing need for better security as it relates to DeFi in the crypto industry. And throughout the research of building Interlock, I have a lot of really cool anecdotes and market stats to share with you on crypto security.
My name is Chris Pariso, also known as Know Your Crook. I come from the traditional security world, the big focus on white-collar crime investigation, counter-terror financing, anti-money laundering, things of that nature, and have found kind of a natural fit in the crypto world, talking with scammers and learning how they do what they do by pretending to be a victim and kind of going along with their game and finding out all the little tricks and then turning around and publishing them for as a trading material.
Hey guys, my name is Matt Bouillon. My training is as a prosecutor primarily. Started out doing criminal cases, moved over to white collar financial type cases, was the securities director for the state of New Mexico a few years ago, and am now in private practice working on scam cases. Much like Chris, I'm fascinated by the many ways that human ingenuity can be leveraged to part people and their money. And as a plaintiff's attorney, I do my best to try to get that back for people. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Moving to the first question, how do you think it's possible? Let's just start with something basic. How is it possible that scammers are able to create an environment where otherwise reasonable people, operate quite comfortably? And so say we receive a message on Telegram or we connect our wallet to a site that looks very, very reasonable and real, and then we're surprised that something like this happened. So what are the most common tricks and mechanisms that are being used both in direct communications as well as in your typical online DeFi scams? And whoever wants to take that question, please go first.
I don't mind kicking things off. I think as far as the tactics that they use or how they create that environment, you can kind of boil it down to three things: fear, FOMO, and greed. They either leverage fear. So you get a text message or an email saying, hey, your Amazon account has been frozen because of suspicious activity. Click here to log in and verify things. And of course, it's a phishing link. In crypto, they tend to focus a lot more on the FOMO, fear of missing out, and greed. So you get a quote tweet, you get tagged in a quote tweet for a fake airdrop. And it looks like, oh, people are getting thousands of dollars worth of one token or another in this airdrop, and it looks like I'm eligible. And when you go to the site, you go to this fake airdrop site, it might say something like the first 500 people get an airdrop, and there's a counter on there, and the counter's at 450, and it's ticking up. And now it's, oh crap, I got to act fast. So they create this environment where you're afraid you're going to miss out. You're feeling greedy because you want the thing. And because of that, you don't think, you just act. And you dive in and made the contracts an asset drainer or something along those lines. So I think those are the three like most common elements that you'll see. And everything else is just kind of leveraging them in one way or another.
Yeah, I agree with that. Chris always has a really eloquent way of putting things. So that was good.
Yeah, it helps us start from first principles too, which I like. And
Yes.
From there we can get to, how that manifests out there in nature. Speaking from experience, I've had cases recently involving apps that looked legitimate and so were designed to cause the end user to let their guard down, or they in fact were legitimate, but simply had a little known exploit that caused an otherwise legitimate app to function in a malicious way. And then from there, the social engineering side of things is very much an exercise in getting people to suspend their psychological disbelief, our tendency to disbelieve when presented with sometimes outrageous information, or, because we fear that there are other people making money that we're not making. And that is a basic human response and easy to exploit.
Yeah. And my experience with all of that has been, and so one of the things I used to build, oddly enough, and some of you may not even know this, but the first products I built for enterprises were actually around security awareness. So I built gamified and data-driven security awareness tools, and those don't exist anymore. So it's certainly not a plug in any way, but those tools essentially judge how well a person performed in certain areas of security, mostly focused, of course, on social engineering, but also physical security, password security, things like that. And from that analysis, we took the scores and said, you need to work on this and that. But what it comes down to for social engineering is that in a corporate environment, if they feel that they are at risk of something bad happening because someone higher up than them is asking them to do something, like they could lose their job, or the boss is mad because they didn't get something done that they, requested in the email or whatever it may be, then they're way more willing and ready to go do that. But in the case of in blockchain and Web3 and crypto, it's a little different because that's not really the driving factor, right? There isn't a corporate person above you. So it's really driven around the concept of what you said, to the FOMO, or the I'm going to miss out on this thing. Or there's a time-driven element here, like, oh, the Mint site just launched and there's only 20 left, even though the number's fake. And you click it and just go because you don't want to be the last one and you don't want to miss the opportunity. And then the other thing is what we found, and it's been documented plenty of times, is that when it comes to social engineering with other people, strangers, whether it was us on this phone call or someone else, if I make you feel guilty for my situation or come to you extremely vulnerable or fake vulnerable and say, I really need this help. I really just need you to do this one thing for me. Just this one quick thing. They don't just suspend disbelief. They don't question it because their conscience rather is, there to say, hey, well, we should help this person because they're asking me to help them. And there's just another guy who's having this issue or needs this help, so I can do it. And those are all the ones that work really well for social engineering. It's unfortunate, but that's the kind of thing, because what we're essentially doing in the process is telling people to not trust so willingly, which is not necessarily the best thing for the world, but also is in a way. You know what I mean?
You know what? It really is, because underlying everything, every single scam out there relies on trust in some form or another. If you don't trust the person that is DMing you or launching a NFT project or a token or anything like that, if you don't have trust in it, you're not going to interact with it. You're not going to send your money in on it. There absolutely has to be trust. And it doesn't matter what scam it is. Every single scam is a confidence scam. If you don't have confidence in them, you will not send them money. And that's their goal. So it's unfortunate when you say you need to be less willing to trust people, but it's true. You need to be less willing to trust people.
I mean, I'm not taking a shot at Americans here, but Americans by and large do tend to be very gullible about certain categories of things. And, this is it's an international group of people. So I feel okay, that's an okay point to make. But some hesitancy when parting with your money is a good thing. That voice in the back of your head telling you to rethink this is a good thing. I don't think it causes a deficit of trust in the world. Hopefully, it leads to more trust.
Well, hopefully people realize that trust should be earned and not just freely given.
Right, exactly.
Especially online.
Oh, yeah.
Especially online.
Thanks, guys. And then moving to, like, let's say moving on with more dictionary definitions. So, Chris, we're hearing a lot about TTPs of scams, and it would be good to dive deeper into this. So, what do you think is the scale of the problem, and just generally, how would we say look into the data on scams? Is the problem increasing? Is the problem decreasing? Because back in, say, 2017, 2018, people didn't really know how to navigate this. Now I think the broader crypto community is more educated on this, but there are still new people coming on board. So how can we generally as an industry prevent and educate that something like this is happening and will be happening in, say, permissionless environments?
Yeah, that's a great question that has been asked for several centuries now. I think a lot of the TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures that scammers in the crypto world use now aren't new. They've been used for literally hundreds of years. So trying to guard against them is difficult, especially in a decentralized environment where, as you said, new people are coming on every day. And there's not a single gateway through which people are entering crypto because, it's global decentralized nature. So there's not a single place where we can have all of the educational material or all of the security browser extensions and wallets and things like that available. It comes down to essentially marketing. What I like to focus on, as Matthew pointed out, is first principles. For any scam that you're going to see in crypto, in Web2, on your emails and anything, you're basically going to come down to three objectives. You've got the scammer wanting you to send them money, the scammer wanting you to send them enough information that they can take your money, and the scammer wanting you to give them access to your social media accounts so that they can borrow credibility from you and make the first two goals easier to achieve, right? If you keep those first principles in mind, those three goals that any scammer has in mind, everything else on top of that is window dressing. Everything else on top of that is just polishing up the ask to make you trust them or to instill fear or FOMO or greed or what have you, to make you do the thing, to make you send them money or enter your seed phrase onto a phishing site or what have you. As time goes on, people have gotten more savvy. 2017, there was the big bull run. Tokens were going 50x, 100x overnight. It was amazing. And there wasn't a lot of security involved. So if somebody wanted to launch a rug pull token, they would take a viral tweet, something from Elon Musk or whomever. They would craft a token around it, say, hey, we're the next big thing, and this is what Musk just talked about, and we're going to go 1,000x on launch. And as soon as they launched, they would rug, and all the liquidity is pulled because it wasn't locked, and people would lose their money. As time went on, people got more savvy and they would start to look at projects like that and think, well, you don't have a security audit. You don't have your liquidity locked on, some third-party site. There's all these red flags. We're not going to put money into you. And so the scammers started to adapt to that, and they started putting out fake contract audits. So they would pretend that they had an audit from someone like Certic, but they just took somebody else's audit and, pasted their name in over the other company's name. They would do something like lock their liquidity, but it was only locked for a week. There's all these things that scammers started doing to get around what people were starting to expect of them, or starting to expect of legitimate projects. So I think it's a constant arms race. Everything is constantly evolving, the security measures that are put in place and the way the scammers adapt to them, which is why I still go back to first principles. You can doll things up all you want, but in the end, there's three goals that they have: your money, information to take your money, access to your socials so they can borrow your credibility and make the first two goals easier to achieve. So education, I think, is the biggest way we can help defend people, like the best way we can help people defend themselves, really. The question is how to make that education widely available and get to people before they get scammed.
Yep. I think that's the crux of it all, right?
It really is like getting left of boom. Like in a traditional security environment, I'm in corporate security. The biggest challenge I face is that everyone is willing to do anything they can to prevent a bad thing from happening again, but convincing them to prevent a bad thing from happening the first time is like pulling teeth. It's so difficult.
Yeah. People would rather buy Tylenol than go to the doctor or buy insurance, basically. Like they'd rather have something that just fixes it after the fact and they know it's available and they can do it. And maybe it isn't an actual fix. You just covered up the symptom or you covered up the problem. Yeah. But it's easier than going to the doctor 2 weeks before you had the issue. Or the other thing is the analogy is always like, even though we don't sell insurance, it almost is, especially in a corporate environment, buying insurance. And your insurance policy in this case is buying the tools to keep your company or people safe from cyber attacks and whatnot. Exactly. Of course, is what I'm referring to. But
it's easier to get people to brush their teeth after they've had a root canal than before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's the challenge. Sometimes people need to get hit to realize that they need to have their guard up. Which
there's interesting stories from early. I don't remember what company it was in particular anyway, so I can't say the name. Even if I did remember, I wouldn't say it. But it was a really big cybersecurity company in Web 2. And we're talking 10, 15 years ago, 10, 12 years ago at this point, not something that happened a few years ago. Their first marketing strategy and go-to-market is they would intentionally go into an office of a company that they were pitching, and they would plant something on the network or on a device on the network to be able to go in and then run their scan that said, oh, like, well, you already have on your network a compromised device that's delivering X, Y, and Z. And because of that, like, the only way to get rid of this is like, you can go fix it now, or you could just buy this thing that we're selling to you and it'll take care of it immediately. And the purpose of all of that, of course, that's the shadiest thing I've ever heard, of course. But on top of that, it's also, they had to be proven that they had this issue before they would consider it. Now, I mean, that's horrible marketing, and there's way better ways to do that, and no one should ever be doing that ever. But my point is they figured it out super early that the only way to get these people to act and to buy the product or sign the contract is to prove to them they're already done. They're already, compromised. Something's already an issue. And I don't remember who it was, but it was a really big company. One now, like, it's not CrowdStrike at all, but at CrowdStrike level, CrowdStrike size. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Back in the day, though. 10, 12 years ago.
Speaking of back in the day, one of the things that really impresses me about the Web3 space and the crypto space in general is just the speed of everything. Because we've been trying to get, I know in my previous jobs, I tried very much to build a public awareness about some of these hacks in meat space. And that was hard enough whenever the targets didn't move quite as quickly. Probably got my first Nigerian prince email, I think in 1999, because I actually had never seen it before, so I was naturally inclined to maybe credit what was being said. That time nobody had come across that, and I think another case comes to mind where I prosecuted a guy who had been running the same scam for the better part of 20 years, and it sounds absurd to a Web3 crowd. But you may see how older folks might go for it. He was going to put radio on the internet. And I'm thinking, at the time it was like 2014. I'm thinking, radio on the internet's been done by now, I'm pretty sure. But in meat space, he was able to recycle this pitch among, fellow churchgoers and that sort of thing. They're your classic kind of fraud by affinity. And basically live off of these proceeds. So he didn't have a real job. He just kind of recycled the same pitch that anybody should have been able to see through. But because it kept working, these are the slow moving targets of the old way of doing things. Now, the as Chris stated, the example Rick just gave, they're fixing it practically in the same breath as they're rolling out the old version and then the new version right behind it. So it's become exponentially more difficult to police and to protect people from.
And
Yep.
while we're at it, Matt, how often, like, who's executing these scams generally? Is this like an individual? Is this a group of individuals? Is this an organized crime group? And I'm talking crypto specifically right now, but feel free to elaborate as well. And also maybe what were the most interesting cases that actually ended up in court, if you can talk about that.
Sure. It's very difficult to get these cases into court unless you're the federal government sometimes, because very often, just as a preliminary matter, they involve potentially throwing good money after bad, which is, for the same reasons people don't brush their teeth until after the root canal. People don't have much, appetite for paying lawyers to go off on a wild goose chase. So I think we're seeing that will happen as time goes on, as lawyers understand how these scams fit into the legal regime, because some of these questions are novel. A fraud can take many forms, of course, but some of these things haven't quite been seen before, and they haven't been distilled for juries before. So finding the neat, clean narrative for why a jury should care about what's going on in these software code in cyberspace is could be a heavy lift. It's going to take lawyers who are able to kind of, I don't want to say dumb it down necessarily, but distill these things to their essence so they're not needlessly complex, because that could also prove to be a barrier to enforcement in the future. And I think that some of the more common things that I see in the crypto space are the slow rugs, obviously. Where there may have been trust at one time, maybe a program head or project lead was, engaged in good faith, working as intended, and then for whatever reason they start to pull back from the project. They maintain sole control over keys, able to control project assets, that sort of thing. Sometimes finding those people and getting those things back is immensely difficult, because the legal system has not really ever had to address things quite like this. So there's going to be just a huge variety of cases coming out as we learn about, them being brought in state and federal courts in the United States, of course, because that's where I practice. I wouldn't be able to talk about how this is being handled in the rest of the world, but certainly there needs to be, and I think there will be, a greater emphasis on this from the crypto community at large. Hopefully that will, cause users need a better experience. As long as a user can't understand what they're approving, then that's a problem. And that may not even be the fault of anybody directly. But it could then be exploited by someone else. So suffice it to say, we're not quite sure which direction it's going to go, because we're not even sure all the time, as you've seen, which laws are supposed to apply to this area. So that these are all issues we'll have to address.
In terms of who's running these scams or who's launching them, I think there's a really even split between larger criminal organizations and individuals or small groups of people. For things like the cold open DMs that you get, or messages. So if you've ever gotten a text message or Signal or WhatsApp message that seems like it was for the wrong person, like it was a wrong number, and they'll say something like, "Hey, Peter, send the design drawings over." And you respond, "Hey, I'm not Peter, sorry." And they strike up a conversation from there. I've had that open, and the following script and the following fake investment site that they eventually send probably 30 or 40 times over the last, 8-9 months. Same script they follow. It's always a young, attractive Chinese woman who they use a PFP of. They always follow the same script when they're talking to you. It's always the same type of fake investment site that they send along. It's all identical, and there's no way this is one person doing the same thing over and over and over again and inevitably hitting the same phone numbers or same DMs or what have you. This is a large organization. Oftentimes I'll have them where they'll reach out on something like text messages, And once they've started talking with you and building rapport a little bit, they'll punt you to another platform like Telegram. And the tone, the cadence, the time of day, everything completely shifts to the point where it's obvious that the person you were initially talking to was the opener. They're there to make contact and rope you in. And then once they feel like they have you hooked, they punt you off to the closer. And the closer is the person that will finally seal the deal and get you to go to their fraudulent investment site or whatever it is, right? This speaks to larger organizations that are doing this. To a lesser extent, you'll see things like the same group of half a dozen people or a couple of influencers launching one rug pull or one slow rug after another, usually in the NFT space, where they spin up a project, they hype it up because they have a couple of accounts that have hundreds of thousands of followers. They can rope people in to mint it and then just disappear after that. So it's pretty rare that you'll see a scam that's just a lone wolf. It's just an individual trying to line their pockets. It's almost always an organization in some form or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
We have to assume that, that is how it's going to be. We've created bearer money. So it stands to reason that organizations, criminal or otherwise, we're going to be after that eventually. And they have the resources overseas to develop, streamlined way of going about it so that it runs like a business. It's just an illicit one.
Yep, absolutely.
Fair. And beyond, these chat-based scams that I think we've all been exposed to at one point or another, or also to an extent typical errors of just ending up on a phishing site. What were the most creative examples of scams that you guys saw? The most elaborate, creative, sophisticated scams that you've encountered over the course of your career?
I have a favorite example that it flipped the script of a usual scam, and it always sticks out to me. So I had someone respond to me on Twitter. I have a lot of accounts that will follow giveaway accounts and just auto respond to them because that tends to pull a lot of scammers in. So one person reached out to me and basically said, "Hey, it's obvious you're in some kind of financial trouble. I want to help you." We chat for a while and it comes down to, I want you to take some money from me, pay off your credit card debt, and while you're at it, donate to a couple of charities that I run because I'd love to get some money over to these charities, right? And they sent along bank account information. So bank account number, username and password, everything I would need to log into this person's online banking account. And they said, "Hey, look, log on to this, make a transfer to yourself for a couple $1,000s to pay off your debt, take some extra to send off to these charities that I control. And, I'm a good philanthropist," right? So I took that information. It was for a business. It was a construction business, I think, out in California. Actually contacted the business and said, "Hey, look, I've got someone that is purporting to be the owner of your company, saying that they're a philanthropist and wants to send me a bunch of money. Is this something he does? What do you think?" And of course, they had no knowledge of this whatsoever. So at the end of the day, what the grift was that the bank account information was compromised somehow. It was stolen by this scammer. And the scammer decided that instead of draining the bank account themselves, they would get somebody else to drain it for them, take some money for themselves, and send money to these supposed charities that were basically their own personal accounts. If I had done this, there would, of course, be an investigation. It's cross state lines, so the FBI would be involved. I would be the one on the hook because I was the one that went into the account, drained funds out, used some of them personally, The person that I was talking to that pretended to be the business owner would be long gone at that point, and I'd be the fall guy. It was really elegantly done. Like, I don't know how else to put it, because it flipped the script of send me money or send me information so I can take your money, right? It was one of the few situations where that actually didn't apply. It wasn't like first principles did not apply here, because they were saying, here is all of my information. Please take my money and use it for yourself, and also for some other things that are totally not my own pockets. That was one of my favorite examples. I loved that one.
I definitely appreciate that example, because that is clearly has more to do with money laundering than it does with actual theft, right? Because it is designed to insert a different person, basically an innocent person, into this chain of people and events, so that it breaks the connection, the causal connection to what the previous people were doing. It's really quite ingenious. I don't usually run into stuff that clever. The stuff I normally see is just classic stuff, the sort of thing that exploits all the classic motivations and doesn't appear to be all that well thought out. I think that all of that being said, the scams that I'm most likely to fall for as just a regular dude on the internet are like when a front end for a DeFi website gets hijacked. Like, I don't have the ability to look at that and tell always something's not right here. So looks like I have some connection issues. Sorry if it's not coming in clear, guys. Those types of scams are hugely effective, and they often lead nowhere.
There was another one about a year ago when free NFT mints were starting to get really, really popular. One or two had popped off onto some really successful projects. So a lot of scammers were starting to use free NFT mints as a front for their scam. And most often they were contract drainers. But there was one I came across that purported to be a free NFT mint. But if you looked at the contract, there was actually a small fee. It was only about $8 or $10 worth of ETH. But if you went to do the free mint, you would see the amount of ETH that was about to be sent out, and it would look like $18, $20, $25, something like that. And you would just look at that and think, oh, gas fees are high right now. Darn, well, it's still a free mint. All I'm paying is gas. But in reality, a little bit was actually being sent off to the contract owner. At the time, there was probably 600 or 700 mints on there. And that was day 1 or 2 of the free mint. So who knows how much they actually raked in. But if you take that and you spread it out over 10, 15, 20 projects, you're going to pull in a lot of money. And you're going to have hundreds or thousands of victims that don't even know they're victims.
And Matt, can you give some insights into the pig butchering example that you were working on? Because I think that's a cool example of both TTPs from a psychology perspective, and then also faulty technology coming together for like the perfect scam.
Sure. That was really difficult. Some of these cases really pull at your heartstrings because you feel for the people involved. In this one, this individual, my client, was approached by someone who held themselves out as an attractive Asian lady on the internet, right? Be very careful. If you're a single dude and an attractive Asian lady wants to just talk to you for no reason, maybe question that. Just a word of advice. But he did, not knowing any better, this gentleman in his 50s, with money to lose, retirement account and that sort of thing, was persuaded by this person who said her name was Wendy Yu or something to that effect, and claimed to be a wealthy investor, convinced this gentleman that he should cash out his retirement account, turn it into ETH, and then send it to her at the address she specified so that she could then place profitable trades on his behalf through the MetaTrader app. Okay. I think this is happening a lot. And this connects with the MetaTrader app because there was a feature, I guess. What would we call it? It's a MetaTrader had an exploit that was well publicized, and it was removed from the Apple Store. And I didn't learn about the exploit until after what happened to this client. And so, of course, once he sends the money off, he is then told to log into his MetaTrader account and observe the profitable trades being placed on his behalf. So this is really diabolical because there weren't any trades being placed. It was all post hoc justified, profitable trades that could be shown as if it were proof that he was making more money when in fact the money was gone. So it was a huge problem because it looked legit based on a third party app. And that my guy had no reason to know that was being controlled and manipulated by the scammer. So hugely difficult. The magnitude of the loss was very high. And when we followed the ETH on chain to see where it went, I think it ended up in OKX or one of the known Chinese exchanges, which would also suggest, it was turned into Tether too, of course. It all suggests that this was probably a very, as Chris has stated already, an organized, sophisticated operation designed to, find guys in a certain demographic on LinkedIn and try to pitch them on a money-making opportunity that has no chance of success and is a fraud from the start. So very, very upsetting to come across this and hard to have these conversations with people because there's nothing really good that you can say. Maybe you have a claim against the app maker. Who knows?
Yeah, it's especially hard because before all that money is sent out, there are weeks or sometimes months worth of rapport and trust building. The social engineering that goes into that before they make the ask to send money or open up an account or what have you. So they think that this person is their best friend. They think that this person is someone that connects with them on a deep level and they can trust them and they can rely on them. So on top of losing all the money, you have a like interpersonal betrayal that sometimes people just don't want to believe. Nobody wants to believe that they made a mistake, that they were dumb or that they were fooled in some way. And sometimes people end up doubling down on their mistake because you challenge their intelligence by saying, hey, you were fooled, and nobody wants to accept that. So they double down on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is just going back to what we said initially. And those are great examples. I don't have any better examples than those. Those were awesome. But doubling down on the fact that it's like they didn't want to not believe that they were talking to that person or that person would betray them. Even though they have no idea who they are, they felt that inherent human trust. And they were like, well, obviously this person's been talking to me. They were wasting all their time. It's got to be legitimate. Why would they waste all their time to do this? And realistically, it was just a big con. But I mean, same goes back to the whole corporate phishing side of things too, is like those attacks can last forever. They're not just always social engineering. Sometimes they are combinations, but the social engineering there can last forever. Very targeted single individual things from fake accounts, like fake LinkedIn's, stuff like that, where people go out of their way. Like I actually did see a scam, nothing compared to those, but it was a person where they found an investor on LinkedIn, and it was a woman, and they replicated a profile of one of the people she was connected to with and communicated with on LinkedIn a lot. So like they had comments back and forth, reposts of each other's stuff, things like that. They replicated that person's account perfectly, other than, of course, the URL is going to be one character or two characters different. But that's an interesting one too, because in that you're not looking at if anyone visits any of our LinkedIn's right now, if I go visit Anthony's, I don't look at the URL to make sure I'm looking at Anthony. You know what I mean? That's very rare because I know what his profile looks like. But, in this case, they replicated the profile perfectly, sent her a message and said, hey, I want you to help me with some diligence on this. Just get your eyeballs on this. Let me know what you think. No request, nothing said like, hey, I need you to send me this so I can do it. Just literally, hey, I need you to look at this company. I'm thinking about it. Just give me your insight. Here's our due diligence packet. And it was actually a Word doc file that had an exploit built into it. Mm-hmm. But it was like a long-term thing, and it wouldn't be easy to just replicate a LinkedIn profile, because LinkedIn also does a lot of like anti-spam, anti-fake account stuff. So that was an interesting one. And the reason why I know is because they reached out to me to say like, hey, what do I do? How do I go about doing this? And I was almost fooled, blah, blah, blah. So it was a big VC too. It wasn't some small no name.
Well, that's essentially how the Ronin hack went down. I believe it was the Ronin hack anyway. There was a person that worked at the firm, and they thought they were going through a job interview process. And for whatever reason, they were using their work machine instead of their personal machine to do it. But they had gone through several rounds of interviews. I think it was 3 rounds of interviews. Eventually were offered this fake position, and the hackers, it turned out North Korean hackers, sent along a PDF of what was supposed to be the offer, right? So like your benefits package and all of that. The PDF was a malicious file. It had a backdoor built into it, and that's what gave the hackers ultimately access to like admin control of the system. But that went on. Same thing. It went on for months that they thought they were going through this interview process. But in the end, it was just, here, download this malicious file. If that was sent on day one, it would have been deleted, picked up by spam filters. Security products would have been all over it. But if you have a lot of that buffering ahead of time, it can slide in and people won't think anything of it.
Yep, absolutely. I'm curious, Anthony, you have to see some, like maybe you didn't do some dissection of these attacks, but you have to see some interesting attacks being like the forward face of Aleph Zero's marketing. What do you see and get in your inbox on a daily basis that scares the crap out of you?
Everything from Milan-based cash investors to, I would say, fake VC profiles on LinkedIn that then loop you into Telegram to, I don't know what happens next. But there's a bunch of these attacks also aimed at different startup founders. And by talking with them, I also identified that the mechanisms, or at least the beginning of the attack, seems it's just also all the same. So it's just something pre-engineered that happens to most startups that say publicly, or it's well known that they're about to launch a sale or that they're fundraising or something like this. So there's also this, I don't know, vertical, let's call it. Yeah. Guys, how often do assets get recovered? How often does the victim get their money back?
Not very often. This is a great opportunity for me to talk about something that I don't get to mention very often, which is there is a separate industry of scam recovery companies that are offshore that are also scams. Okay,
scams. Yeah. So exactly.
This is they're targeting people who have already lost money. They know the only reason you're contacting them is because you lost money, and this is traditionally work that lawyers do in the United States, but for some reason in Israel, I see a lot of these. They will tell you that they get back 99% of the money that they set out to recover, and that they want, a very large retainer up front, of course. Please do not, engage with these companies. They make promises they can't keep, and they often are in jurisdictions where you cannot get recovery. So you run the risk of being harmed twice, is what I'm saying, in that type of scam. And that's a really unfortunate that exists, but it is an easy way for them to make a lot of money. And otherwise, I would say, there's numerous problems with asserting jurisdiction over overseas participants. In the United States, you have to demonstrate that a person basically reached into a particular jurisdiction and did something, mindful that the laws of that place applied to their conduct. And that can be difficult in a pseudonymous, internet-based world. So you don't want to be in a situation where you're having to get money back. Now, if it's a centralized operator, then maybe you have a better chance of success because at minimum, they are a company, they do have assets, they have lawyers, they can be sued, and so on. But some of these places that run, a forked code of some other decentralized exchange, we'll call it that. They're set up in the Cayman Islands at a PO box. You're not going to get anything back from these places. So that's an unfortunate fact.
Yep.
If anybody ever wants to test this out on their own, go onto Twitter and tweet out something like, "I was just hacked. I lost all my ETH." You don't have to hashtag it, cashtag it, anything. Tweet out something like that. "I was hacked. I lost a BAYC, what have you." Within a minute, you will have a half dozen or more replies saying, "Had the same thing happen to me. Contact this person on Instagram," or, email this person. They can help. There's definitely a cottage industry of people ready and waiting to kick victims while they're down and to re-victimize them. And they feed off of the fear and the desperation for a victim to make things right. If you get hacked, and I say get hacked, but 99% of the time it wasn't a hack. It was the victim did something they shouldn't have done.
Right.
But if the victim does something they shouldn't have done, they connected to a wallet drainer or what have you, there is a time of disbelief. There's a time of like, no, I could not have been that stupid. I could not have made a mistake. It's not too late. I can make this right. And there's a cottage industry of people ready and waiting to swoop in and say, "You're absolutely correct. You can make this right. Yeah. Give me your seed phrase, give me $500, and I can get your assets back for you for a small fee. Mm-hmm. I'll keep 5%. It's nothing big. It's worth it, right?" And they'll entice people to do that. And it's kind of a decentralized pig butchering where the same person gets victimized over and over again.
Yeah, let's not forget why they call it pig butchering, right? Usually there is a lead time where you fatten up the pig. I hate to say it, but this process of getting familiar with someone to the point where they're willing to send you money is the fattening process, and then when they take the money is the butchering. So it's a colorful phrase.
Yep.
Definitely. And then if we move to say we've already established that like the education is key, obviously, but it's super hard to reach people as they enter, say, an industry or interact with a new product. And that's why basically the entire cybersecurity industry exists as well. So is the key to like ensuring individuals' safety, providing them with a seamless solution that just is there with them and prevents them from say connecting to malicious sites, because that's what Interlock's doing. That's what also in the Web2 world you had similar solutions. So how effective is that basically in daily lives of most people?
Yeah. So having built, obviously, super biased because that's literally what we do, but having been building security products for years at this point, and I talked about the education one I built first, that was phased out a few years later because we were actually a little too early for that industry and we didn't want to be content creators at the time. But moving away from that, we started building tools that were focused on protecting individuals within corporations, preventing them from getting phished and attacked. And then, of course, led to Interlock, which is keeping individuals from being phished and keeping individuals from being hacked and losing their assets, their money, their credit cards, you name it. So very familiar with all of that. And the reason why we do it, and I think this will help explain it, is in some ways, not in some ways, it's very true. Security is everything about cybersecurity is layered. And one of the layers is education and getting people to understand what they need to do and how to do it. But another layer is keeping them safe on a technical perspective so they are unable to make that mistake. And then there's another layer where whatever application they're using has to be secure. But focusing on those first two layers, when you talk about education, you're essentially saying, here's how to not be social engineered. Here's how to Be analytical about the thing you're about to do before you go click that link, do the wrong thing, make that mistake you didn't mean to make. Here's what you need to pay attention to. However, no matter how much you do that, how much you teach, and how many times you teach it, or how many times you tell people, or how many times we craft really cool, informative pieces on Twitter or on blogs and whatever, no matter how many times, there will be a time when someone's vulnerable. They may be vulnerable because they just woke up. They may be vulnerable because their significant other is sick, or one of their parents is in the hospital, or they're vulnerable because they've had a long day. You can name whatever reason you want to. They're vulnerable. They're not paying attention. They're distracted by something else, and they just want to get this one thing done that they need to get done. And then the street sweeper goes by right as I'm talking about it. They want to get that one thing done right as they're doing it. And because their guards are down, they're busy with something else, their mind is elsewhere, they click the link and they do the thing they're not supposed to do accidentally. And that's where the second layer happens. That's why that second layer of technical protection exists, whether that be Interlock or McAfee that's installed when you buy your laptop from a big box store, whatever it may be. That technical layer exists to prevent that from happening next and then keeping you secure. So in my mind, you have to have those, but you also have to have the education. And then you also need to make sure that the companies that those people are interacting with and the products that they're using outside of that are also secure. And, projects that are legitimate, whether it be a Bored Ape NFT or even Interlock itself, are audited and ensure that the products that they've built are secure as best to their possible ability. And then go a layer further and make sure that the internet protocol, there are a lot of layers in between there that are much smaller and minute when you dig into security, but I'm trying to make it more broad. But then you look at the protocols and are you visiting a site over HTTPS? And that's all just a layered approach to security. Again, very generalized from what in reality, but that layered approach to security is how we accomplish keeping people safe. So it isn't one or the other. It's not if, it's actually all. And that even goes for combining multiple tools. Like, it doesn't mean just because you have one tool that keeps you safe while you browse, you don't need another one or shouldn't have another one that you trust or like or want. There's no problem with stacking these things. And that's, there are, I take that back. There are some problems with stacking too many things. However, for the most part, the layered approach is the key to security in general. So whether you be an individual, whether you be a corporation or a startup that's just getting going, think about that as the process for whole. And any good security person who's on your team or teaching you what you're doing or running you through an audit or talking to you about how to set up your network, whatever it may be, knows that. And they should know that a layered approach is key. And you should never trust a security company that says they can do everything, ever, because it's just not true. And if they say they're 100% effective, they're lying. Even me. If you ever catch me saying Interlock's 100% effective, make sure I'm actually saying it and my account hasn't been taken over, because I would never say that.
I will be the first to call you out on that.
I know you would.
Promise. But no, I could not agree more. Security in all aspects has to be layered. There has to be the personal education because, at the end of it, the person behind the computer, behind the mouse, like controlling the mouse or on their phone, makes the final decision on whether or not they're going to do a thing. And I've had scammers try to talk me around the warnings. So I've been talking with a scammer that says, go to this fake investment site. I go to it and MetaMask actually throws up a warning saying, hey, this is a known phishing site. Don't do it. And I screenshotted it and sent it to them just for the reaction. They said, oh, we have an outdated security certificate. Our tech's working on that. It's going to be back up next week. Don't worry about it. On the bottom right of that message, it says, go anyway. Just click that and you'll be on the site. So, you have all these warnings, but if the user wants to do a thing, they're going to do a thing. So there's the education there to help teach them to not do the thing. But those warnings, that second layer on the technology level, where the bright orange screens or the pop-ups or whatever pop up and say, hey, you're about to do something really, really dangerous. Are you absolutely sure? MetaMask recently put in warnings if a contract has set approval for all. And now they throw big red text saying, hey, you're about to give them completely unfettered access to absolutely every asset in your wallet. Are you sure you want to do this? And I think that kind of warning built into all of the common software that people use is what we really need to start seeing. If MetaMask had done that on day one, and so had Trust Wallet and every other mobile or browser wallet that people use, if they had those clear warnings built in on day one when they launched, the level of scams that we have seen would have been significantly lower. And if you take that out and you say, or you extend that and you say, if Brave and Chrome and Firefox and all of the most common browsers also did the same thing, if they also had built in right from the start these kind of phishing detection and warnings and what have you, scams would be significantly harder to pull off. It's just like Rick said, when you buy a laptop from a big box store, you're going to have some kind of antivirus already installed on there. Windows has built-in antivirus on there, right? That protects you from the most common forms of scams and or malware rather. And those most common forms of malware aren't really a thing anymore. They don't hit people at nearly the scale that they used to. Email is the same thing. Gmail, the spam filters have gotten significantly better over the last 10 years. And most of the spam that people would have initially clicked on because, Home Depot says I want a new power drill, I'm going to click here. That just goes into the spam box and people never see it anymore. They don't have to think about it. It's automatic. That eventually is where I think Web3 needs to get to, is every wallet, browser, everything has these sort of security layers built into them. People don't even need to know they're there, but they're there and they're working.
Absolutely. And quiet is key, unless it needs to not be, of course. There's always the aspect of not bothering people too much, or then they go uninstall something or try to turn it off or subvert it. That's been another problem with security that's always happened, is not just people convincing you to subvert those problems. Some people are, especially in a corporate environment, I keep going back to that, but that's just because where I spent so many years dealing with that. But in a corporate environment, you keep people away from Facebook long enough, and suddenly they know how to set up a reverse proxy. They don't even know what that means, but they know how to set it up because they want to access Facebook. So like you make things too loud, too noisy, too annoying, and then they start trying to turn it off. So the key is these good, relatively quiet tools that keep you on the just steps away from the precipice is where you want to be. You know what I mean?
And we're actually recording this on the same day that I learned about the hack or the exploit of this Yearn V1 contract.
Yep.
That if people just weren't using deprecated contracts, it probably wouldn't have occurred. So even on a very basic level, are you using the latest version of the thing that you think you're using? It would be great to know that without having to, do any kind of in-depth research. Just have a flashing red light saying this is old, don't use it.
Yeah, that's great. Goes into the layers, updates and upgrades, and making sure you're at the latest version is always, well, not again, always. I keep using the word always. And then every time I say it, I'm like, well, not always, but most of the time, it's a great idea to always be up to date. However, we've seen security issues, at least I have, where someone updated something and then they realized almost immediately there was an exploit in it and everyone was updating right away. And there was a big issue with that one thing because it already was found. But anyway, that's an outlier case, not the one that you would normally see. So keeping things updated is all part of that process, and making sure that you're paying attention to that as part of all the layers.
That's why Patch Tuesday always leads to Exploit Wednesday.
Exactly.
All right. So thank you, guys. And then since we're wrapping up, what's your one sentence of advice to an average user of Web3? And to some extent, I guess this also translates into Web2, to stay sane, stay safe, and protect your funds online.
Don't trust, verify. I know it sounds kind of flippant, but you really need to verify things on your own. Slow down, take the time. If anyone tells you that you have to act now or otherwise miss out, fine, miss out. They do not have your best interests at heart, and they're probably trying to take advantage of you. So don't trust, verify.
That's a good one. I would say mine's a little more tactical, but along the same veins. If you get a link, type it in. Don't follow the hyperlink. Type it in. You get a link that's I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's docs.google.com. I don't care. And that's what the hyperlink shows you. If you are getting an email from your bank or a Web3 project or whatever it may be, and you see it says click this link so you can verify your password, whatever, just go type the URL in your browser and see if that's actually the truth, because most likely the link you're about to click isn't the real URL. Same with Twitter. You see a link, it's doing that thing, it's for a mint site. Go find the real mint site. Type the mint site URL in. Don't follow the link.
I would say just slow down. There is no hurry. Whatever you're doing, chances are you are not under the time pressure you believe you are under. Take your time to make sure you understand what you're doing before you do it.
Even if you miss the boat, there will always be another boat after it.
That's the great thing about this space.
Thank you guys for everything. Very, very happy to have had the opportunity to host you here and looking forward to chatting soon.